I said, wait a minute. I started looking at all the people that was connected to the White House who were in positions of power. And I said, wait a minute, these people, none of these people come from slave backgrounds in America. And I said, that can't be a coincidence. So Barack Obama, his family didn't descend from slaves. Eric Holder, he's from the Caribbean. His family didn't descend from slaves.
There was a lot of slaves in the Caribbean.
No, I'm talking about here.
Oh,
Here. That's different. Here,
no,
right here.
If you're from the Caribbean and you black, you most likely are a descendant of slaves.
Right, but I'm talking about here, a foundational black American. That's very important.
I think Colin Powell is from
He's Jamaican. He's Jamaican, right. It's very different. You connected to the soil here because your energy is going to be different. That's why when you look at movies now, when they talk about slavery and civil rights, they'll get a lot of African actors to do those roles now because a lot of foundational black American actors who would do those roles, they would get on those slave plantations and those ancestral memories would pop up and they would kind of flip out. John Amos, he talked about being on the set of Roots in the 70s and they were filming on a plantation. He freaked out on that plantation because those ancestral memories come up. It gets too real for you. Our brother who recently died, Michael, what's that brother? He was in The Wire.
Michael Williams?
Yeah. He was on, I think, 12 Years a Slave. He had a breakdown on the plantation. You did? He went down there and filmed, had a breakdown. A lot of our actors and actresses, they get on these plantations and you feel that damn energy.
So they don't want to hire black Americans to do
So they're like, if it gets real for them, that's going to get real for the viewer. You know what I'm saying? That's going to transfer to the viewer. They don't want us to get it, to get that energy that's too real like that. So they really make a lot of these movies for white people to enjoy.
Grand Rising family, welcome back to my YouTube commentary. This is Kenyan Beast, and today I'm traveling deep beyond school textbooks, deep beyond the media illusion, deep beyond colonial lies, because I want to know something. We have been hearing about foundational black Americans. Sometimes even when I do a content, some people are texting or are commenting that I am foundational, I am FBA, we as FBA, we were here before this, and I was like, God damn it, who are foundational black Americans? So today we are going to discover who the foundational black Americans are, what history tried to erase, and how this truth changes everything we thought we knew about America and the world. And before I start, I want you to watch this clip first, and then I'll come back with more commentary.
So, it's been a couple of days. There's been a lot going on this weekend if you guys are based in reality. But I've been kind of just chilling, having like a good time because I keep getting reported for hate speech. So mean of you guys to bully me. But I would love to make it very clear that I don't see color, I'm just a FBA'er who has been foundational to the United States of America for like a very long time. And I know that you guys have this misunderstanding about whether we are an organization, a hate group, or like we keep saying, possibly a lineage. I'm gonna clarify it though with ChatGPT. I'm gonna talk about what is FBA? Are we a hate group? Is there even a leader of this hate group if it is such? Are we different from other Americans that have not been on this part of the continent of America for over at least 200, 300 years, right? We're just talking about the United States of America. That was founded in 1776. So that would make anyone who was here on that land foundational, right? We're not talking about Ameri Indians. We're not talking about Native Americans who just got their legal status as being citizens of the USA in 1924. We're talking about people who are foundational and who have been integrated in the society since that point in time. If you notice this map, we could break this up into two parts, the North and the South. Now the North part, way different than the South part, right? The North part is where all of those immigrants and poor people came from Europe after 1880. I would say other people, but they weren't bringing in people like that unless you were Chinese and you came over here to build a railroad and then you were kicked back out. Or if you were maybe Latino and you came to the southern part during the early 1900s to pick berries and whatnot, and then you were kicked out. I'm talking about the people who never get kicked out. Foundational Black Americans. But don't take my word for it. Let's ask ChatGPT. So can you tell me, what is a foundational Black American? And can you say this under 2 minutes?
Sure. A foundational Black American, or FBA, is someone who is a direct descendant of Black people who were already in the United States before it became the United States, meaning before or around 1776, and who either experienced chattel slavery, were freedmen, or were reclassified indigenous people. They're called foundational because their labor, culture, and blood built the foundation of the country. We're talking about people who were here through slavery, emancipation, Jim Crow, the Civil Rights era, and all the way to now, 8 or more generations deep. What makes them distinct is that they're not immigrants. They didn't arrive after 1965, like many African, Caribbean, or South American groups. They've been here from the beginning and have a unique identity, culture, and claim to this land that's different from anyone else.
So why do people think that we're a hate group? And mostly people online, maybe on TikTok to be exact.
Honestly, a lot of that comes from misunderstanding and projection. On TikTok especially, people often skim the surface of terms like FBA without knowing the history or context. When they hear foundational Black American, they assume it means anti-immigrant or exclusionary, instead of what it actually is, a lineage-based identity. Also, some people who claim the FBA label do say wild things online, and those clips get pushed by the algorithm. So instead of people seeing the whole movement about cultural preservation, reparations, and historical accuracy, they see the drama. Add to that the fact that we live in a time where everyone wants to flatten identity into race alone. But FBA is about lineage, history, and nationhood, which challenges the status quo. That's uncomfortable for some folks, so they label it as hate instead of doing the deeper research.
And then also, I find it interesting because, a Haitian American is a Haitian American. A Dominican, they don't see Black. Cubans, other people on the continent of America, they all have their own culture, right? Jamaicans. And then inside their nations, they are multicultural. So why is it okay for everyone except for foundational Black Americans, as I like to call them, Aboriginal United Statians, people who were on this part of the land? Why is it so wrong for us to delineate? Because I remember trying to include these people, and it wasn't that long ago. I remember the Dominicans saying, "Me no Black."
Exactly. That's the core of the frustration. You're hitting it right on the head. Everyone else is allowed to have a distinct national and cultural identity. Haitians are Haitian, Jamaicans are Jamaican. Even within Latin America, you've got Afro-Colombians, Afro-Brazilians. No one questions their right to name and define themselves within the borders of their nations. But when it comes to us, the descendants of the people who literally built the United States from the ground up, we're told we have to just be Black, lumped into a vague global identity that erases our history, our suffering, and our cultural contributions. And what's wild is that we didn't even start this delineation fight. Like you said, Me No Black has been coming from other groups for decades. We tried the Pan-African route, we tried to unify under Black, but when we looked around, we realized we were standing alone. So now reclaiming our own name, whether that's FBA, ADOS, or Aboriginal United Stations, isn't about hate. It's about sovereignty and truth. People get uncomfortable because once we name ourselves, they can't project onto us anymore. They have to face the fact that our lineage, our struggle, and our inheritance is unique, and that, to be real, shakes their sense of access.
And can you say this under a minute too before we finalize this? I think that is super interesting too, that these pale palm colored people who came here after like what 1880 earliest, like these people literally their great grandparents and their great grandparents are immigrants from Europe sitting here trying to say that they built America. You didn't build anything. You were over there eating potatoes and whatnot in your third world country in Eastern Europe. Can you expound on that? It's all
Right.
love.
And here's the short version, under a minute. It's wild how the same people whose great-grandparents didn't even step foot in America until the late 1800s now act like they built the country. Meanwhile, our ancestors were already here, building the railroads, the White House, the wealth, while their folks were still in Europe dealing with famine and war. And somehow, we're the ones told to go back or stop claiming what's rightfully ours. Nah, we're not new here. We're the foundation. And it's not hate to say that. It's just facts.
I'm gonna be honest. I find it very offensive. I've been kind of like chilling a little bit, because we are in a artificial reality. And to be honest, we're on TikTok. If you're here with me, we are under a psyop. Welcome to CIA shenanigans and whatnot. Our government is always messing with us. But you would know that if you had grandparents and great-grandparents and great-greats and great-great-greats and great-great-great-greats that were here before you immigrated over here. So when I say tether, I'm not talking about race because I don't see race. That is a white supremacist ideology. But I'm going to land my plane there. Put your comments in the comment section below. Let's do the bottom-up format of supporting each other. And until then, bye.
It is us who were the buffer for immigrants. We were the majority of the ones being shot and killed in the street. We were the ones who were being lynched from trees. We were the ones who were being beaten and terrorized by these white supremacists in this country. We were the buffer between white supremacists and immigrants in this country. And y'all did not come and be a buffer between white supremacists and us. If we're going to talk about it, let's be truthful about it. It has always been us. It continues to be us. Y'all aren't the only ones being terrorized in this current environment. That video that you shared proves it. It continues to be Black Americans that are dealing with these terrorists in this country. The difference is we are no longer the buffer, and you all are feeling the terrorism from white supremacists in this country.
Child, the foundational Black American story is one of the greatest ever told. Resistance, resilience, and reimagining. And baby, that's the gag. We didn't just survive. We authored that shit. We are the blueprint. Full stop. Now here's the problem. Folks love to play in our faces with that tired ass question. Where are you from? No, really, where are you from? As if the word American only belongs to white people. Because for them to admit that we shaped this country through our own resistance and destiny, that would shatter the very foundation of their belief in white supremacy. Baby, that's why they come at us sideways. Because deep down, they can't fathom how we survived slavery, Jim Crow, and systemic oppression, and still created a culture that the whole world copies. That confusion turns into jealousy. That jealousy turns into disrespect. Let me be crystal clear. We don't need their validation. Black Americans are the blueprint because I'm American. My family is from North Carolina, mom and dad. And I can't tell you the number of times I get asked that dumbass question. Where are you from? No, really, where are you from? North Carolina, generations deep. Because I'm not about to do Olympic level ancestry to make somebody else feel comfortable. Ain't it funny how nobody asks white Americans where they're really from? But let a black American say I'm American and somehow it's like the Wi-Fi cut out. The manufactured confusion. What they don't understand is our story is layered. African roots, European ancestry, not by choice, native connections, and it all converges right here in the United States of America. That's our reality. That's our identity. And that's exactly why some of them are jealous. They can't wrap their heads around how we carried and still carry the weight of oppression and still became the cultural heartbeats of this nation. Music, fashion, innovation, style, language, and I could go on, but I'm not. We set the tone every single damn time. So the next time someone tries to play in your face and say black folks have no culture, no values, here's the list, baby. Family, liberty, justice, God, creativity, and survival. Those are our values. That's our culture. We are who we say we are and who they wish they could be, but never will. We are American. Full stop. So here's my ask of you. Stop giving clout, likes, and comments to folks who make a living disrespecting us. Block them. Protect your peace. Because the Black American story is too sacred to let outsiders rewrite. Child, it's too much. So drink your water. Stay rooted, real, and knowledgeable. And mind your black business. Happy Black History 365. And I'll see you next time.
Now, welcome back. When most people hear the term FBA, Foundational Black America, they think of descendants of the slaves, okay? But that definition created by white American or white historians was never meant to empower. It was meant to reduce, okay? To them, black people were an economic product. But to us, FBA were nation builders. FBA were engineers of survival. FBA were keepers of knowledge that predates America itself, okay? Every empire created a myth, and America created its myth. And the myth of America was discovery. They claimed Europeans discovered a new world, ignoring the presence of millions of indigenous people. They ignored the evidence that Africans were already there. Now, example, we have a fact from the ancient Olim heads in Mexico, carved with undeniable African features, to the Mandinka sailors from Mali's Mansa Abu with undeniable, from Mali's Mansa Abu Bakari expedition, the 1300s, to the oral records of native tribe describing black men who came from the east by the sea. History screams the truth that black people had been here in America. Black people had been in America long before Columbus got lost. But that truth disrupted the European story and conquest. So they buried it. They banned that truth and they rewrote it in classroom to make Europe look like the beginning of everything. So this erasure of foundational black Americans began before America even had a name. It was a part of a global project, okay? To disconnect black people from their own greatness, because once a people forget who they are, they become easier to control. Once people forget who they are, they become easier to exploit and to use as building material for someone else's empire, okay? Before slavery, we need to know this. Before slavery, black people presence or black presence and power in the Americas was there. Blacks were present. Before the chains, before the ships, before the civilization, before what they call civilization, there was already civilization. Africa had traders. The traders were masters of navigation all the way from Kemet, ancient Egypt, to Mali, to Songhai. These traders, these African traders, they mapped the stars and crossed oceans. Historians like Ivan van Septima, they came before Columbus, okay? Exposed records of African voyage to the Americas centuries before Europeans. The Olmecs built a colossal stone head with full African lips and noses, symbols of respect to visitors from across the sea. Okay, indigenous tribes in the Caribbean spoke a black trader bringing gold, a black trader bringing salt and cotton long before Columbus. So black people were doing business even before Columbus said he discovered this and that. We mapped everything. There is evidence and historians are speaking. Everything that I've told you, it means one thing. The first contact between Africa and the America was the peaceful and mutual, not violent and enslaving. It was trade, not terror. It was the bridge. But European colonizers couldn't allow the story to exist because it will prove that black people were not discovered. It will prove or it will erase that lie. They wanted them to be the one who are discovering black people. So when colonization began, white explorers saw the remnants of this early African indigenous connection. Dark-skinned tribes shared symbols, similar spiritual systems, and they panicked. They destroyed what they found and called it primitive. They renamed the people and took the credit. By the time we were in 1600s arrived, the narrative was flipped. Africa were no longer travelers. Africa were no longer merchants or allies. They became the property of an empire built on lies. Now, between 1400 and 1800, over 12 million Africans were kidnapped and trafficked across the Atlantic. But this wasn't random. The people taken were not the weakest. They were strategically chosen. They took the metal workers of Benin. They took the builders of Mali. They took the healers of Congo. The rice farmers of Sierra Leone who understood irrigation better than Europeans, they were taken. They didn't capture ignorance, but they captured expertise. They captured those who were experienced. Why? The slave trade was a human resource theft, a systematic or a systemized kidnapping of Africa's brightest. Every plantation in America was an important university of African genius forced into labor. Africans brought architecture. Africa brought herbal medicine. Africa brought astronomy and music. They carried agricultural knowledge that made the South profitable. Even the food that became Southern cuisine, like okra, black-eyed peas, and gumbo, all of these came from African hands. And yet the story was rewritten to make the enslavers look like creators and the enslaved look like consumers. But the truth is, black labor build white wealth. Black knowledge build white industries. And black creativity build American culture. Okay? And this education wasn't just physical. It was psychological. By calling the enslaved uncivilized, the system just justified the exploitation. But the irony is cruel. The so-called civilized world needed the so-called uncivilized world people to survive. You know? So who are the real builders of America? The phrase FBA, the phrase Foundational Black America, exists because without them, without FBAs, there will be no foundation at all. Every monument, every system, every early economy had a black hand behind it. The US Capitol, the White House, and major roads in Washington, D.C. were built by enslaved Africans. The railroads that connected the nation were maintained by black laborers. Cotton itself, America white gold, funded the Europe Industrial Revolution, was planted by black hands. And while white historians celebrated figures like George Washington, they erased the hundreds of unnamed black architects, black engineers, black artisans, whose hands shaped the very building where laws were written to keep them enslaved. Even in bondage, black people invented. People like Benjamin Banneker, the mathematician and astronomer, he helped design Washington, D.C. Henry Blair invented the corn planter and cottonseed planter. Thomas Jennings created the first dry cleaning process and used the profit to fund a abolition. But the US Patent Office before 1865 denied patents to enslaved people. Their ideas were stolen. Their ideas were monetized. Ideas were whitewashed. The American dream in the true form was the African nightmare turned inside out, because every dollar of early American wealth was stained with African blood and African brilliance. While white supremacy sought to crush the body, it could never cage the spirit. The spirit remained. So foundational black Americans invented a new language of survival, a spiritual code of hidden inside art, inside music, and inside faith. The Negro spirituals were not simple church songs, but they were encrypted message read in the water. This told the enslaved to travel through river to escape tracking dogs, follow the drinking god, pointed to the North Star, a cosmic map to freedom. Every shout, every drumbeat, every dance was resistance disguised as worship. The ring shout wasn't just praise, but it was communication, it was remembrance, it was a rebellion. The same culture that birthed gospel would later evolve into blues, into jazz, into hip-hop, into R&B, into the heartbeat of the world music today. But look at how the system reacted. Every time black creativity rose, white corporation extracted, diluted, and profited. They did that to blues, to rock, to jazz, to pop, okay? Even spirituality was colonized. Spirituality was colonized. The Christianity taught enslaved Africans, or the Christianity taught to enslaved Africans, was an edited one. Was the real one was stripped of African principles, manipulated into obedience, and yet through reinterpretation, black people turned into liberation theology. So the same Bible used to enslave became a weapon to organize revolts and inspire abolitionists. And that's what make the foundational black America story divine. But they turned oppression into innovation. FBA turned oppression into innovation. Now, freedom didn't arrive as a gift. Freedom came as a test. Okay? When emancipation hit millions of black people, freedom did not arrive as a gift. It came as a test. Okay? When emancipation hit millions of black people, stepped into a world that had never planned for their freedom. They had no land, they had no capital, they had no safety, but yet they built. They founded more than 60 all-black towns in the South and Midwest Rosewood. They founded Tulsa, Greenwood District, and village in New York. There's a village in New York, I think it's called Seneca Village, and more. They built banks, they built hospitals, they built newspapers and schools. But success bred fear. Okay? White mobs backed by police and politicians burned their cities to the ground. Tulsa's Black Wall Street in 1921 was bombed from the air. Wilmington 1898. So it elected black leaders assassinated. Each time black excellence rose, America answered with violence. And still, these foundational black people just rebuilt it. Out of ashes came entrepreneurs like Madam C.J. Walker, the first self-made female millionaire in America. Our empire wasn't about cosmetics, but it was about economic dignity. Came Booker T. Washington and Tuskegee Institute turned education into liberation. Okay, W.E.B. Du Bois and the Niagara movement planted the roots for the NAACP. Okay, so this was not isolated miracles. They were a collective refusal to die. So FBS proved that the same hands once forced to pick cotton could now manufacture future. When the Civil War ended, slavery ended. But America simply rebranded oppression. There came Jim Crow laws, there came sharecropping, vagrancy acts, and convict leasing turned freedom into just another trap. And black men were arrested for just loitering and leased back to the plantation and mines. Okay, with the prison system as its disguise, the system still managed to put black people back to the farms, and those systems stand until today. It is called mass inculcation. Meanwhile, education was segregated by design. Schools received pennies compared to white institutions. Textbook painted black people as inferior. Hollywood pushed the same narrative with films like Birth of the Nation, glorifying the KKK and demonizing black men. Okay, what America needed, the illusion of superiority to survive. is guilty. And that illusion became policy. That illusion became media. That illusion became psychology. Okay? But at the end of the day, foundational Black America fought back. They fought quietly, they fought brilliantly, and they built underground education networks. They put teachers in one room. Sharks taught maths. They taught history and dignity. They created music that spoke truth, like jazz and blues became coded protest. They formed a black press called Chicago Defender and Pitbull Carrier. So every act of creativity was a resistance. Every church service was strategy. Every migration was a chess move. Jim Crow was not just a set of laws. It was a war on black advancement. But foundational Black Americans understood something powerful, that you can cage a body but never a conscience that has tasted freedom. After centuries of fighting for spaces, the system changed tactics again. Okay? It turned to mental warfare. It erased a people's memory. And if you erase a people's memory, you erase their future. Now, schools began teaching American history as if black people appeared only in chains. Okay? They were not mentioning ancient Egypt. They were not mentioning Mali universities. They were not mentioning black soldiers who saved the Union. So instead, black students were taught to admire the same figures who enslaved them. Okay? Black students were taught to Mount Rushmore because it became sacred, while we had Harry Tubman who was reduced to a paragraph. Okay? In 1933, the Carnegie Corporation funded education reforms that standardized white-centric textbooks. In the 1950s, Hollywood produced over 100 films showing Africa as savage, making black children ashamed of their roots. Meanwhile, white kids grew up believing their ancestors were geniuses who civilized the world, and that psychological imbalance. And that psychological imbalances fuels racism to this day. But truth has a rhythm, Truth always finds its way back. Because from 1960s onward, Pan-African thinkers like John Henry Clark, Dr. Ben Jochanan, Chancellor Williams began rewriting history and African perspective. And Malcolm X told us, only fool lets his enemy educate his children. And now today, this torch burns online. FBS scholars, historians, and digital creators are reconstructing history in real time. They are uploading truth faster than lies can spread. And that's why modern system of power panics. They cannot stop this new information revolution. Okay? Truth is resurfacing right now about FBS, about black people. So what happens now when the truth is resurfacing? The system awakes because it's the greatest fear in an informed, because its greatest fear is an informed black world. So foundational Black America were reclaiming narrative through art, through scholarship and unity. Museums are being challenged to repatriate stolen artifacts, Now, black filmmakers right now are rewriting history with accuracy and pride. Children are learning their history they're learning what their ancestors said. So this is more than education. This is a resurrection. When a people know their origin, they know their direction. When a generation recognizes its foundational, they stop asking for permission to exist. Okay? So the call is now. We have to unite. Build schools that teach the real history, support black-owned media that tells our truth, and connect Africa to the diaspora. It's one of economic force. If you do that things will be fine, and black people are going back far. So tell me what you think on the comment section about this video. Until next episode, peace out.